All right, we are right at noon, so we're going to get started. I see a question in the Q&A box, which I love. I'm going to try to answer everybody's questions about solar, whatever your solar or storage questions. This question in the Q&A has to do with EVs. I think it's a great one. Go ahead and put them in the Q&A box, and we're going to get to Q&A at the end. But I love that we already have a question. So welcome. My name is Zach Snyder. I am a program manager, currently the only staff, though I will soon be joined by a second here at Solar Oregon. We put on these webinars, education focused towards solar and related technologies. This is the first time we've hosted a webinar that is solar and storage. We have hosted our How to Go Solar for years and years, helping people to learn, home and business owners learn how to navigate the technology. And solar and storage is increasingly adopted together, though obviously not all the time. And that's why we have launched this new augmented curriculum. I hope that you enjoy it. This is a little bit of an overview of what we're going to take a look at. We are going to first take a look at what is solar, what does it look like, what are the components of it, and we're going to take a look as part of that at net metering, which, if that doesn't make sense to you right now, it will in just a few minutes. We're then going to look at what makes your home a good fit for solar. We're talking about the structural characteristics. We're talking about, do you get enough sunlight? Is your roof in good condition? That type of thing. After that, we will dive into energy storage. We've received a ton of feedback in our recent webinars that storage is what people want to learn about. So if you have storage questions, I hope that they're answered. And if not, put them in the Q&A. And I will attempt to answer them at the end. We're going to talk about incentives, which will mostly be solar incentives, but I'll touch on some energy storage incentive as well. And then we'll talk about, how do you get started? Say that you have all the information you need then about solar and energy storage. You're ready to adopt one or both of them. What's the process and what should you do to make sure that you have a good experience? So let's go ahead and let me first introduce Solar Oregon a little bit more. We are a 40-year-old nonprofit that educates and advocates to increase solar adoption across Oregon. And being such an old organization, we have a long history. Solar 40 years ago was something completely different than it is nowadays. Now we have a really thriving industry, and solar is, I think, very much the focus of a lot of different discussions. So really glad to be here. I've been here for 2.5 years. We host webinars like this. We host tours, and campaign-based efforts to advocate for solar, and as well as focusing on just storytelling and getting the word out about solar. So we're a member-based nonprofit. That is our donation link. If you are a member, thank you so much for being one. If you're not, please consider joining. It's really quick and easy. Go on the Solar Oregon website. I'm actually going to drop some links into the chat, and because I don't have a helper today, they're all together. But you'll see a link for our website is the top one. The next link is a link to our events on Eventbrite. The donation link is there. Also information about Energy Trust of Oregon, and I'll reference these links and put them back in the chat a little bit later. But thank you so much for everybody who is supporting the work that we do. Also, thank you to the Energy Trust of Oregon. They're a large independent nonprofit that administers a lot of the incentives to do with solar and energy efficiency in our state, specifically serving customers of Portland General Electric, Pacific Power, Northwest Natural, Cascade Natural Gas, and Avista. Chances are, if you're in Oregon, you have your electric and gas needs served by those utilities because they cover a lot of the state. And Energy Trust of Oregon also supports great educational content like this. So I love to hear from you guys. I love to make this as interactive as possible. Please feel free to say hi in the chat. If you don't see your bar of buttons, you can mouse over probably in the bottom part of your screen. You'll see the chat icon. It should say the word chat underneath the little bubble. You click on that, you can type in the chat. If you have questions that you want me to answer in the Q&A section, please don't put those in the chat, put those in the Q&A box, which you should also have access to on your bar of buttons, and your bar of buttons will have something that says Q&A. If you can't find that for whatever reason, you can put them in the chat, but I'll just answer the Q&A box questions before the chat questions. I also like to launch a few polls, and this is just for me to get to know who's here today, so I know how I can best talk about solar and storage to you. So I'm going to launch the first poll. You should see a box showing up on your screen. It's just asking where you're joining from. So there's a few options, including Portland, Willamette Valley, Oregon Coast, Eastern Oregon, Southern Oregon, a different state, or international. That does happen. So you guys are fast. Looks like we've got pretty much everybody already. I'm just going to give another second for the last. And there we go. All right. Very quick poll. So just going to share these real quick. We can see we're mostly in Portland, a little bit outside of Portland, but in the Willamette Valley, and a few people from out of state. So welcome to Oregon, virtually at least. I'm also going to launch a poll on demographics. This is optional and anonymous, won't be shared. And it's just to help us understand who we are reaching with our programming. So if you would just take a minute and fill that out if you like. All right, I'm going to give just half a minute here for you to finish up. Looks like we've got most people with their responses in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. Thank you. And I've got one last poll here at the beginning, which is to gauge if you know what we in part are going to be talking about today. So there's two questions. They both ask about your familiarity with a specific incentive. The first question is about the Energy Trust of Oregon standard incentive. And the question is, are you familiar? Yes, no. If you're not sure, just click maybe. And the second one is Energy Trust Solar Within Reach incentive. So I'm just going to give a minute here for you to answer that. All right. Just gonna wrap this up here. Thank you. And it looks like we've got a good split. So it's great that some folks are aware. If you're not, you will certainly be by the end of this webinar. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So how does solar work? Let's take a look at the basics. Here's a diagram that I like to start with. This shows a home. It shows the different components of a solar system, which I'll walk through. The sunlight strikes the solar panel, which you'll see up above the home to the left. Obviously, that's just where it is in this diagram. The solar panel will be on your roof, most likely. And you can see the little blue cells in the solar panel. Not all solar panels look like that. The sunlight strikes the panel. It produces a bit of electricity, produces a voltage. And that's what we're looking for. It's really very simple. And the only thing that we need to do to that electricity is change its form, because solar panels produce electricity in form called DC electricity, which is direct current. And our homes use electricity in AC, which is alternating current. If you don't quite remember that distinction, don't worry about it at all. Just know that there is a box called an inverter or microinverter, which has some electronics in it, which convert the DC to AC electricity. Then the electricity goes into the, it gets wired into the electrical panel in your home, likely in your garage or wherever your breaker box is. That's your electrical panel. From there, it flows to all the circuits in your home, powers your lights, your appliances, anything you plug into the wall. And if you are producing more electricity than you are needing from your solar panels at that moment, the electricity can flow out through your utility meter and back out onto the electricity grid. So one thing to note here is that you typically, until you go solar, you have a utility meter that only measures electricity flowing from the grid to your home, because that's how homes historically have been set up. When you go solar, you'll have your utility meter swapped out from a unidirectional meter, only going one direction, to a bidirectional meter that measures electricity going both ways. And so then when it's nighttime and you're not producing solar energy, but you've got the lights on, you're charging a computer, you are able to purchase electricity still from the utility grid. When it's really sunny and maybe you're not even home, you'll be exporting a lot of that energy out onto the utility grid. And with this bidirectional meter, you can measure how much energy is going in both directions. And that's really important for net metering, which is a system of accounting that electricity, which we'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. So first, let's take a couple of quick looks here at the components. The inverter that I mentioned that converts the form of electricity to a form that's usable in your home. On the left, you can see an inverter. That's this white box, and that gets wired up to between the solar panels and your home's electrical panel. Here you see it on the outside of a house, which sometimes that's where it's installed. More often, and ideally, it's installed next to your breaker box if there's space there. Though it's just fine to have your inverter outside, and they're built for that. Microinverters, if you look at the photo on the right, are these little black boxes. They sit underneath the solar panels. There's an microinverter for every 1 or 2 solar panels, and it does the same exact thing as an inverter. These are very comparable technologies. When you're talking to a solar contractor, there may be an option between an inverter, which also comes with little boxes underneath the solar panels called optimizers, or just the microinverters. And there is no clear-cut one is better than the other. It kind of depends on your situation. So you'll want to talk with your contractor when you're at that point to figure out what is the right technology for your case. Solar can be mounted on the roof, which is a perfect place to put it because the roof otherwise is just acting as a passive element, protecting your home. Now it can produce clean electricity for you. You can also install solar on a ground mount if you have the space for it. Note that that's also an excellent option, though there are some added costs for trenching a wire because you'll need to wire that electricity still up to the breaker panel in your home or business. In urban environments, roof mount is far and away the most common way to install solar. Now to that system of net metering, which again, this is how you account for the energy that you're exporting to the grid and gain benefit from that. This slide shows 2 charts, and these charts show an example of a summer month where in Oregon we have really sunny days and you're expect to produce a lot of energy versus winter months when it's a little bit cloudier, just to illustrate how net metering works. So in the chart on the left, you can see the orange bar is the amount of electricity that you're producing from your solar system. So that's your electricity that you're producing. The blue bar is how much energy you're consuming. This is with your lights, your appliances, everything. And you can see that in a summer month, your production might be higher than your consumption. And so you, over the course of that month, have on the net, on the average, have produced more energy. And so that green arrow shows you how much net metering credit you have earned. These credits they roll over from month to month. And so you accumulate them in the sunny summer months, and then in the winter, you take a look and you see maybe you're producing less energy from your solar panels than you're consuming. And so you'll be able to use those credits that you stored up in the summer months. So the great thing is that in Oregon, the net metering year starts in March. And so that is when our sunnier weather starts. And so that's when you are able to start building up those credits, which you can use to offset your electrical costs in the winter, cloudier parts of the year. One thing to note that's really important is though these credits do roll over month to month, they don't roll over year to year, or rather net metering year to net metering year. And so if you have a solar system that exceeds the average amount of energy that you use in a year, you'll tend to lose those credits, forfeit them at the end of the net metering year. This is why you want to have a solar system that matches your expected annual energy needs, but that does not exceed it. That way you're gaining the maximum benefit from your system, the maximum quote unquote return on your investment. Solar contractors are extremely aware of this, and they recommend the system that will meet but not exceed your limits. And this brings us to the core benefit of solar. Obviously, solar is a clean energy. It has benefits for society as a whole. It's a way to decarbonize the energy that you use, which a lot of people can feel really good about. But at the end of the day, many people make a decision on whether to go solar actually based on the finances. And so obviously solar, because you're producing energy, that's energy that you don't have to buy from your utility company. This is just an example bill from a utility company. And the energy that you save, the money that you save, excuse me, on your utility bills then eventually will pay off the initial system cost. And after your system is paid back, you're essentially receiving free energy because the solar panels continue to do what they do. So that is really what attracts a lot of people to solar, and why it's, I like to think of it as a form of wealth generation for your family. So that's the basics of net metered solar. And so let's take a look at what makes a site good for solar. A lot of people are disappointed to learn that their home is not good for solar. Some people, you can't install solar on their home at all. Some homes, it's possible, but you might incur a little bit of extra cost. Some homes are just perfect for it naturally. So we're going to take a look at what plays into that. First thing I want to talk about is system size. So solar is incredibly modular. You can have a system that is very small, a few panels. You probably won't find an installer who will install one that's less than around 6 panels maybe, because it's not economically in your best interest. But you can go as large as you want until you reach another constraint. And so the average home in Oregon, say the range of homes, I would say the vast majority of homes have between 6 and 40 solar panels in Oregon. The biggest constraint that you'll run into then is how much energy do you consume over the course of the year? And that's because of what I just spoke about with net metering, because you don't want a system that's larger than your needs. However, you may be constrained in terms of space. If your roof is not big enough, maybe you're constrained in terms of budget. You want to buy a smaller system now and then buy a larger system later. That is possible, though you will want to mention that to your contractor when you install the first portion to make sure that you're not going to incur extra cost by needing a separate inverter if you could avoid it by scaling up your inverter in the first place. And just a final note here, the average system size is, the system size is measured in quote unquote KW, that's kilowatts. That's just a nameplate rating. You don't have to worry about what that means. The average size is 6 kilowatts. That corresponds roughly to about 18 panels, but it does depend slightly on the wattage of the panel. Next, let's take a look at your access to the actual resource, because solar panels only work if you have sunshine. And the great news is that even in cloudy Oregon, even in the Willamette Valley, we have plenty of sunshine for solar. It's true that if you are in a very sunny desert environment, you will bump your production. However, fun fact, Portland has and the Willamette Valley, as cloudy as we are, we actually have more sunlight every year than Germany, and Germany is the most solarized nation per capita, and solar works just fine there. So the sun travels from the east to the west, and because we're in the northern hemisphere, it travels in the southern sky, which means that your roof that is facing south, any roof plane that's facing south is naturally going to be the best for solar. East and west facing roofs also work just fine. East facing roofs, sometimes you can, it might be right at the threshold of acceptability, and that's just because we have cloudier, mistier mornings. West facing roofs, hardly ever an issue unless your east and west facing roof is very highly pitched. So if your roof is very steep, you might find that you have additional shading from that on the east and west facing roofs, though not on the south facing roof. You hardly ever see solar installed on the north facing roof. So that's just a general feeler for the cardinal directions, how that plays into your solar access. Additionally, there may be an obstruction that shades your home. It may be a tree, which is not too uncommon here in Oregon. It may be a building. I will say that even if you feel like you have a ton of vegetation around your home, I would still talk to a contractor. Don't assume that you are too shaded for solar. Sometimes it looks like you have a ton of trees around, but actually your southern facing sky is very open and you have no issue. Other times you feel like you have a very open sky, but there's just that one tall tree to the south of your home that can throw the whole equation off. So a contractor will be able to tell, usually from Google Maps, if your home is too shaded, and if not, they might come to your home and assess it with a little device. Your roof itself, how it's constructed, does have some bearing on how easily you can install solar. I like to just describe this as the difference between a complex roof and a simple roof. So you can see on the left, the roof there has many roof planes. It's very broken up. And you obviously need a flat surface to install the solar panels on. So, and you need contiguous area is better. You can install panels on multiple roof planes, and that's actually quite common. However, it does decrease your options for how you can orient them. On the right, you see a simpler roof that's south facing, and you can just line up the solar panels on it. So it's a little bit easier. Roof condition, roof age. This does matter. So you can install solar on many different roof types, and pretty much any roof type it is possible to install solar on. All of the major roof types, composite shingle, which is very standard, standing seam, and cedar shake, any of the, even, tiles, you can install solar on. You really want to make sure, though, that you don't need to re-roof soon. So, because when you re-roof, what you'll have to do is pay a solar contractor, and it's a job that an Oregon electrician has to do. Get up on the roof, uninstall the solar system, re-roof then with your roofing contractor, and then have the solar contractor get back up and install the solar system all over again on the new roof. And that can add several $1,000s to the cost. So you want to avoid this. The best time to install solar, obviously, is when you have a new roof, or if you have enough roof life left, even if your roof has been around for some years. Metal roofs last longer, and you want at the minimum 10 years of life left on your roof. I would say really ideally, you should look for 20 years of life left on your roof if you can. And finally, taking a look at the roof structure, you will, in most jurisdictions, not run into any issue in terms of your code requirements and permitting. But in places like Portland, where it's a little bit more strict, Portland has requirements that that your roof be very robust, not because of the weight of the solar panels pressing down, but actually because as the wind travels across the panels and the panels rest a few inches above your roof, it produces a slight shearing force, which can actually pull the roof up. Not a huge issue. However, in a strict code environment like Portland, you want to make sure that you have a strong roof to avoid extra cost from needing to get an engineer to take a look at it or even reinforce your roof. So a couple little quick rules here if you want to take a look in your attic. The image on the left is of a home with trusses, and you can see that just means there's these support beams that are horizontal on the side or vertical on the side and horizontal up on top. In addition, in this image, you can see there are these little metal brackets, and that usually means that your home has prefabricated trusses. You should have no issue whatsoever with that extra support. The home on the right could be just fine for solar. You won't see those vertical or horizontal support beams here in this image. Instead, you just have rafters that run from the crest down to the eave. And the rafters, they will be fine as long as they don't span too far of a distance. If they span too far of a distance, you will need to have an engineer take a look at them. That can add up to maybe around $700 of cost. And worst case, if you need reinforcement, your solar contractor will be able to tell you what you need and they'll perform the work, but it will be extra cost for the materials. Sometimes it's as easy as adding a board and doing what's called sistering, where you just screw on a board next to the rafter that kind of parallels the rafter. In both of those cases, it's extremely rare to have a house that you cannot install solar on at all. But sometimes you need that engineering or that reinforcement. So hopefully that gives you a vague idea of your own home. Just note that all of these are loose rules that just help you get a good sense. If you're uncertain about your home, you'll want to talk to a solar contractor and they can definitely assess your home and let you know what you need. So let's get to the new exciting material that's in this webinar that is on solar and storage. And storage is a home battery or battery for your business. And solar and storage is a really excellent combination. So I'm going to debunk a little myth here. Solar itself, if you just have a home or a business and you install solar on it and the power goes off in your neighborhood, you cannot use the energy from your solar panels. And that even in the daylight, even if it's producing electricity, and that is because of a national electrical code requirement that your system be shut off from the wider grid, and it turns the system off. And some people have the impression that solar can do that. Solar by itself does not. Batteries are the technology that are going to allow you to weather an outage. And so this will be particularly of interest to you if you are on the edge of a grid and you have more frequent outages, or if you are concerned about energy resilience, or you have specific needs that really mean that you cannot sustain comfortably an outage. So the great thing is that solar makes battery storage more effective. because the battery will store the energy and then say the grid goes down and you use that energy until the battery is depleted, but the solar will be able to recharge that battery. So solar and storage is an excellent combination. Here's a few reasons to think about energy resilience. It's increasingly a hot topic in what we talk about, what we hear about, that people are concerned about, and in terms of the state's planning. So the most common source of outages are storms and squirrels. Squirrels chew through electrical lines, and storms take down electric poles, and that causes a temporary outage. Additionally, and increasingly, we see public safety power shutoffs in Oregon. If you remember in 2020, when we had the devastating fire season where many communities burned down in Oregon, that was an unprecedented event in certain ways. However, it's expected that dangerous fire conditions will contribute to more wildfires in the future. The reason that matters for the energy being on and the lights being on is that the utility companies are a huge cause of a lot of wildfires, and there are miles and miles of poorly maintained lines. This is the same thing that happened in California, but in Oregon, we're starting to see it's an issue now too. And in order to prevent their equipment, their power lines, from causing an outage by sparking a tree, say, that's grown into the line, the utilities are increasingly shutting off large sections of their grid to prevent that when there's really high fire danger, high winds and high temperatures. And so we start to see that in places like Hood River and other places in the state. You may be notified if your community is at risk for that. Many communities are not, at least not recognized to be right now. And so I wouldn't say that everybody should be hyper concerned about it, but that is increasingly something to think about. Additionally, cyber attacks are identified as a significant threat by the Oregon Department of Energy and the Department of Energy, and there aren't any notable cases, to my knowledge, that have occurred yet, but it is a vulnerability. And finally, we live in the Cascadia seismic zone. We know we will have a very large earthquake. The power will go off for 6 weeks in the Willamette Valley region, it is expected, in certain places. And in that case, batteries can be a critical tool to provide power for communications, for refrigeration, for food, and for medicines and things like that. So it's really important to think about the resilience of our state as a whole. Solar and storage, as I mentioned, this is a great technology for it. Here's a look at a home that has both a battery and solar on the roof. A note on battery selection. There are a number of technologies available now. This market is growing incredibly quickly. As recently as 2018, there were just very few people installing batteries in their homes when they also go solar. Now it is increasingly common in Oregon. And during the COVID supply chain shortages, there were certainly shortages of batteries, also because the demand was very high. And in California, you see that installing batteries with storage is increasingly even the norm because they have a more advanced solar market than we do here in Oregon. And batteries are important for a number of reasons. So you have multiple options. A lot of people are most aware of the Tesla Powerwall, I think because of the name recognition and the brand recognition. But talk with your contractor, you'll find that these batteries have certain pros and cons, and your contractor can walk you through what the best technology for you is. Additionally, it's important to set your expectations when you want a battery. A lot of people show up to a solar contractor, they say, I want a battery. Some people even pay the money and have one installed and then realize that it won't do everything that they imagined it would. So the typical home battery, everything on the previous slide, the image of all those batteries, will not typically back up your whole home for an extended period of time. That is extremely rare. Excuse my rice cooker. You will either go for a partial home backup or a whole home backup. You can achieve a partial home backup with one battery. Sometimes even two batteries is still a partial home backup, but it gives you more capacity. Whole home backup might be possible if you have 3, 4, 5 batteries. Obviously, cost is a huge concern there because batteries are, although the prices are coming down, they are still expensive. And so you can expect that this is just some images of batteries, multiple batteries, to show you that people do indeed put in the capital to invest in that. Though obviously not everybody can or will choose to. In terms of how you should plan your needs for and how those needs will be met with a battery, ask yourself what needs power and for how long. And so typically, if you are wanting to be as efficient with your resources and how you're investing that in energy resilience, you'll typically focus on just the bare essentials. So maybe a refrigerator to keep your food cool. That would probably be nice during an outage. Maybe also some lights in critical areas like the kitchen and the bedrooms and maybe a living room. And also some outlets so you can charge a computer, cell phone, other communications devices. That's typically what people choose, is just to power those few circuits in the home. And then think about for how long do you want those backed up? Because are you getting a battery because you live in a more rural area and you receive frequent short-term outages that only last for a few hours and then are fixed by the utility company? In that case, you might not need resilience for, even 8 hours. Maybe just a battery that serves you for 3 or 4 hours would do just fine. If you are less concerned about that and more concerned about the events like a public safety power shutoff or a longer term event like power loss due to an earthquake, you'll want to plan maybe a longer period of time when your batteries will serve you. In that case, you might need more battery capacity. And in that case, you may start to consider an additional battery or additional batteries. The process of actually selecting the circuits that you want to power, you'll have that conversation with your solar contractor. It'll be a thorough conversation. Make sure that you are telling them everything that you want and that you know what you want during an outage. And what they'll do is they will pick the circuits from your existing circuit breaker and install a separate, smaller circuit breaker and move those breakers from the main electrical panel that you've always had into this newer, smaller electrical panel. And they'll attach the battery only to that panel. And that smaller panel, the new one is called the Essential Loads panel. That's everything that will be backed up by the battery. Everything else in an outage will not be backed up by the battery. And so you can't pick and choose, I want this outlet and then the same outlet that is on the same circuit. You need to choose at the circuit breaker level what you want powered and what you don't. So that is a quick overview on a very rich and complex topic. I'm sure you probably have questions. Feel free to continue to put those in the Q&A. We are going to get into incentives and then we'll talk about how to get started with all of this. So the first thing I want to note about incentives and about price is that this is a chart of the price of solar, so not energy storage, but just solar, over the past 10 years, roughly, from 2010 to 2019. You can see that the price cut in by more than half. And that is just because the industry, as it has grown, has achieved those economies of scale. And so it delivers a much better product at a much lower price. And that is true also for energy storage, though energy storage is not quite as far along on this curve. You'll note, though, that the curve is a little bit steeper earlier on, and then it kind of flattens out. That's kind of what's happened with solar. Energy storage is a little bit earlier on in this curve than solar is, and so it's still seeing rapid price declines. Solar, we expect to also see price declines going on for years into the future, but not quite as fast as storage at this point. The incentives that are available for solar, I'm going to give you an overview on the main ones. Should be all of the ones unless you are outside of one of the main utilities. And I'm happy to answer questions about that in the Q&A if you're not in one of these main big utility companies, Portland General Electric or Pacific Power in Oregon. So everybody everywhere across the country has access to the solar investment tax credit. That's a big incentive. That's 26%. This is a tax credit, not a tax deduction. So it's dollar for dollar. And an important thing to note is this is not an incentive that's upfront. It's something that you get back on your taxes when you file them, and you have to file for this incentive. So you have to work that out with whoever is preparing your taxes. And another important thing to note is that you have to have the tax liability. Say that you are able to receive a $4,500 federal tax credit. If you don't have that tax liability, and I think you can pay it off over the course of a few years, but if you don't have that liability at all, then you won't be able to take advantage of this incentive. So that's just one thing to note about that. The next incentive I want to talk about is at the state level. So everybody in Oregon is able to receive this incentive. This is the solar and storage rebate. This is an upfront incentive that your contractor applies for and receives on your behalf and passes on to you. And that is up to $5,000, depending on the size of the system. And I'll get into that in just a minute. For solar, it's also up to $2,500 for energy storage. And so that's why it's called the solar plus storage rebate. Finally, if you are in Portland General Electric or Pacific Power, which most people in Oregon are, but not everybody is, you have access to the Energy Trust of Oregon incentives. And if you're in Portland General Electric, that's $1.2 thousand. Or if you're in Pacific Power, that's $900, and that's a flat rate, regardless of the size of the solar system. That's their standard incentive. It just changed, and that's their main incentive if you're not income qualified. Energy Trust of Oregon also provides, and this is the main way in which they're incentivizing solar these days, a really big incentive if you are income qualified. So this is for if you are below a certain income threshold, which is a relatively generous one. So just for example, if you're a household of 4 residents and you earn as a household less than $106,000, that means that you are eligible for this incentive. And in Pacific Power, it's up to $4,200. In Portland General Electric, it's up to $8,400. It is based on the size of the system, so it's a $1 per watt incentive, but you get that full value as long as you are installing the average. It maxes out at the average size of system, which, as I mentioned before, is 6 kilowatts or roughly 18 panels. So if you have a smaller than average system, you'll get slightly less incentive proportionally. If you have a larger system, you'll just max out at that max value. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the links back in the chat. Sorry, I'm dropping all of them again. But if you look at the link that is the Solar Within Reach incentive, which is it's right above my presenter contact at the bottom in the chat. You can click on that. You can see information about different sizes of households and where you qualify. Additionally, I want to give you some more information about the solar and storage rebate from the Oregon Department of Energy. Again, this is available to anybody, even if you're outside of the main utilities in Oregon. And it is a $5,000 maximum incentive for solar, $2,500 for energy storage. Your contractor will apply for this on your behalf. And that maximum threshold of $5,000 for the solar is that maxes out at the percentage of cost of the system. So if you are not income qualified, then that $5,000, you get the full amount if that is 40% or less of the total cost of your solar system. If you are under their income thresholds, which are a little bit more conservative than Energy Trust income thresholds, then that $5,000 can account for no more than 60% of the system cost. So just something to note about your eligibility and where that max incentive is. Now, this is pretty much everybody's favorite slide. It's going to be 2 slides. This is an example budget for a system. First, we're going to go through Portland General Electric, then we're going to go through Pacific Power, if that's your, pay attention on each one of those, if that's your utility. And an important thing to note is that it's really difficult to estimate the cost of a solar system for a number of reasons. And that's mostly to do with the fact that the solar system, your solar system may range in size considerably, like I mentioned, maybe from 6 panels up to 40. And that has a huge impact on the cost. Also, certain aspects of your site, if your site is really remote, it may incur extra cost. If your home is really tall, maybe you for some reason have a 5-story home and your roof is really steep, so it's more dangerous to work on, it can increase the cost of installation slightly. But this is an average. And so we're going to take a look at the average cost of a system that is roughly 18 panels, roughly 6 kilowatts. So before incentives, we're assuming that that is about $20,000. And you can see in the, we're going to add the incentives here. So when you add the Energy Trust of Oregon incentive, that's either going to be $1,200 or $8,400 if you are eligible for solar within reach. That's the income qualified one. And that takes you down to your net cost. Even this is not what you will pay out of pocket, because you can also then add the state, that's the Oregon Department of Energy, ODO rebate, which is $5,000 for this 6 kilowatt system. And after you apply those 2 incentives, then you reach the out-of-pocket cost that you will pay. And so from $20,000, we've lowered that to just under $14,000 if you're not income qualified, or if you are, to just over $6,000. Then we can apply the federal tax credit, which is the 26%. You do not get that when you install, but you get that when you file your taxes the following year. And assuming you have tax liability, that brings you down to, if you're not income qualified, roughly a $10,000 installation cost. If you are, roughly $5,000. So you can see that the incentives make a big difference. And you'll want to talk to your contractor to make sure that you are eligible for all of these incentives, and they'll be able to walk you through the whole process. So that's for PGE. Let's take a look for Pacific Power, if that's your utility. I'm not going to walk through every step, but you can see we start with the same $20,000 cost. The Energy Trust incentives are $900 for the standard incentive, or $4,200 for the solar within reach. The state solar plus storage rebate is going to be the same $5,000 as long as you can get that. And in the end, your final cost to the customer is going to be roughly the same for non-income qualified, but for income qualified, it'll be around $8,000. So hopefully this gives you an idea of the value of the incentives and maybe what to expect very roughly in terms of the cost of a solar system. Note that this does not include the cost of energy storage. So how do you get started? If you are a customer of Portland General Electric or Pacific Power, you are within the domain of Energy Trust of Oregon, and you have access to their incentives. And Energy Trust of Oregon also qualifies contractors and maintains a list of qualified contractors who are rigorously vetted. And so you can be sure that if you choose one of these contractors that's on this list, that you will have a good contractor to work with. And so you can take a look. These are called the Trade Allies of Energy Trust of Oregon. You need to install with the Trade Ally of Energy Trust of Oregon in order to receive any Energy Trust incentive. So there's a strong incentive to do that, especially if you can install, or if you're eligible, excuse me, for the Solar Within Reach incentive. However, it's just a great way to ensure that you're getting a high quality installation. The links that I posted just a minute ago, I'm going to refer you back up to them. There's a great link titled Energy Trust Solar Bid Tool, and you'll see the URL there in the chat. Save that link. That is a tool that you can use when you're ready to get a quote. You feel like you are confident and now might be the time to install solar. This tool provided by Energy Trust of Oregon, you take 2 to 3 minutes, maybe 2 to 5 minutes, you fill out your information, and it will automatically be sent to 3 randomly selected Energy Trust Trade Allies who serve your area and who are the highest rated contractors in your area. And it's a great way to really easily get 3 quotes that you can then compare and decide what is the right company for you. So highly recommend that you look at that tool. When it actually comes to installation, this is a turnkey service. So when you have talked with your contractor, you've examined a few bids, you've selected the one that looks the best to you, you sign on the line, and usually you'll make an upfront payment, and then you might make payments, remaining payments later on once the installation is complete. And by turnkey, what I mean is when you sign, the contractor then takes care of everything else. They complete all the paperwork, the permitting, the design of the system, of course, and eventually they'll get you on their construction calendar. Sometimes there may be a wait because the permitting takes a little bit of time. In Portland, you might experience a little bit of a permitting delay, which is because the city permitting office is incredibly backlogged, especially during COVID. But once they get you on their construction calendar, they'll just spend typically 1 or 2 days, very often just 1 day, actually on your site installing the solar system. So it's pretty quick and painless. And then the contractor will manage the inspections to make sure that the system meets all of the code requirements of the city. And then they will manage the meter swap. So you'll get your new bidirectional meter, and then they will manage the interconnection with the utility. Once you are interconnected, they'll turn your system on, and you'll be able to see the energy that your system is producing from your solar system monitoring. So it's a great feeling. And once you have gone solar, you are producing energy then that you are using every single day. So that's the process of going solar. I am very excited to answer. It looks like we've got a ton of questions in the Q&A. First, before we do that, I am going to put my contact information on the screen. I'm going to launch one last poll also, which is a post-event survey. This has some questions about what you learned, and also if you felt like this was a good event for you. So please take just a minute to fill out that incentive. And I'm going to go ahead and open this Q&A box and start answering this Q&A. So Sparkle asks, I am considering an electric auto purchase. Will I be able to charge it from a home solar system? And yes, when you install solar, it powers all of these circuits in your home. And you will have, if you charge your electric vehicle at home, you'll either plug your vehicle into a standard 110 volt outlet, which is the slow way, that's level 1 charging, or you'll get a special box to do level 2 charging, which allows you to charge in 3 to 4 hours. And in which case that's 220 volts. Either way, you'll be able to say that you are charging your car on sunshine, because that is energy that is flowing through all the circuits of your home. Stephanie asks about community solar, which we did not cover today, but I'm happy to talk about. Community solar is an excellent, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that you guys can see me. Community solar is an entirely different thing. I'm happy to give a quick overview. Basically, a solar system is installed somewhere in the state. Maybe it's on a big solar farm out in the country. Maybe it's on a large building in an urban area. And as long as that solar system is owned or on the same grid as your utility company, you have the ability to subscribe to it. This is a new program that started in 2020. And there are community solar installations across the state. If you want information about that and information about where to sign up, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link in the chat. Oh, so many windows open right now. That link, community solar, that's going to take you to the state's community solar site, and you can find a project to subscribe to. Community solar might be a good fit for you if your home is too shaded, or maybe you don't own your home and you rent. You can still subscribe to one of these systems. You can benefit, you can support solar by doing that. You can benefit by receiving some moderate energy savings. And if you're income qualified, you can actually receive more significant savings. And it's a good option if solar otherwise is not in the cards for you. Gretchen asks, if we have a home that is not served by Energy Trust, Wasco Electric, can we still do solar, or will it be too difficult? That's an excellent question. So a lot of what I've talked about has been in the context of being either a customer of Portland General Electric or Pacific Power. A lot of it will still apply to other smaller utilities like Wasco Electric, like all sorts of little municipal and electric cooperatives that are rural. They all have their own rules, however, so it really does depend on whether your utility company has a net metering program, whether that net metering program compensates you for your kilowatt hour at the same rate, at least at the same rate as they charge you for a kilowatt hour, because sometimes they'll charge you, say, this much, but they'll only pay you this much, which in my opinion is kind of a dirty trick. But the best way to find out is find a solar contractor in your area, and they will let you know what the obstacles are and what the potential pros and cons are of going solar in your area. I do think that Wasco Electric just got rid of their net metering program, which, if I'm correct, would be unfortunate. But again, contact a contractor and they'll have up-to-date information for you. Dan asks, what do you mean by net metering starts in March? Does it mean before March you can't gain any credits? That's a great question. So I just want to clarify. This is just, think of March in terms of net metering starts in March. This is saying that the calendar year doesn't start on January 1st. The net metering calendar year starts on March. If you say in February, right before that, right, have a really sunny February and you produce more electricity than you consume, you still get credits for that. But if you have excess credits at the end of February, they don't roll over from February to March. They roll over from month to month, every month, except from February to March. And so that's why you have to look at it in terms of the course of the whole year. And you want to make sure that your system is meeting your needs, but not exceeding the average amount of electricity that you use over the course of the year. I hope that answers it. If it doesn't, just put something in the Q&A box and I'll try to hone in on it a little bit closer. So does your solar supply household needs directly? This is a question about I think what types of things in your home the solar powers, and I think that I may have answered that since the question was asked, but yeah, it does power every single circuit in your home. So whether that's lights, your appliances are also connected to a circuit in your circuit breaker. Everything is connected there except freestanding devices that, if you had something that was like a pump that was powered by a generator outside, that would not be powered by solar. Someone asks, can batteries be charged from the grid? And that's a great question. The answer is yes. In fact, that is frequently the case. So you can have a battery without solar, certainly. And in fact, battery without solar, you can still use power during an outage. Solar without a battery, you can't. So the battery really is where that energy resilience capability comes in. And so the battery can certainly be charged from the grid. It can also be charged from the energy produced by your solar system. Someone asks, when moving breakers from a main panel to an essential loads panel, does that often require rewiring of a whole home? That's a great question. I have never peeked over the electrician when it happens, but I am very confident when I say that if you look inside your electrical panel, you'll see all the breakers. If you were to look behind them, you'll see this kind of nest of wires, and the electrician will essentially take those and just move those breakers and those wires, reroute them over to a new panel right next door, so just a few feet away ideally. You don't have to rewire any other part of the home, just the space between the breaker and the new, where it was and where it now is in the new panel. And so you don't rewire the whole home, but you rewire just the portion of the circuit that is in that area right next to the breaker panels, if that makes sense. Sarah asks, is the supply chain still impacting solar/battery availability? It's a great question. And I think that there are still some impacts. Most recently, aluminum which is used in the framing of a solar panel, was the thing in short supply. It hasn't had, to my knowledge, a huge impact on the price of solar modules. It did tick up slightly. I showed you the graph of declining solar installation costs over the course of 10 years, and you see that it's declining that whole time. It did tick up slightly during COVID, and I believe it is either at that same place or it has come back down now. I wish I had more up-to-date information, but my knowledge is a couple of months behind, unfortunately. Gretchen asks, we have a well pump with its own electrical service that we would like to have solar plus battery backup. That's great. Is it common to install smaller systems like that? I would say that is potentially an excellent use case for solar. Maybe you're paying for diesel to power a generator, and you're wanting just a solar and battery solution for that. It's certainly possible. I try to get the word out about solar as a solution for that exact type of thing. One thing you will note is that it looks like maybe it's not a diesel generator, maybe it's an electrical service that is powering an electrical pump, and now you want to have solar plus battery backed up onto there. If you're asking that for resilience, then that's also a great use case, especially if you have frequent outages. You'll want to make sure that you have a firm, for good expectations about what the cost is for that type of service. I would say, again, contact a contractor and they'll be able to walk you through your options. When it comes to something like that, though, definitely, if you can, definitely talk to a few contractors, because batteries are a little bit newer. Solar contractors typically, they have their business really well figured out. Batteries are new enough that there are some contractors that are really on the ball, really doing well with batteries, but everybody's still learning in the industry. And so if you talk to someone and they say that's going to be prohibitively expensive, it may be, but also get several quotes. I think it's more important when you're looking at batteries to look at several quotes. Steve, you mentioned not seeing any of the links in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and place them in one more time if I can, and see if I can fix that for you. Sorry if for some reason that's not coming through. Oh, I can't copy paste anymore. I'll get that at the end. At the worst case, you can email me and I'm happy to email the links out to you. Pamela asks, what is the cost of storage? So I did not cover the cost of storage. You might notice I just covered the cost of solar. I may in the future put together a cost for energy storage, but because things change so quickly, it is a little bit harder to do. I can tell you that it is, if you want to set a very rough expectation for what a battery might cost, I'll give you an example that a Tesla Powerwall, which this may have changed in the few months since I last checked the prices. I'm about to do some of this research for our next iteration of this webinar to make sure that I have the up-to-date prices. The Tesla Powerwall, I would say last year, may have cost $6,000 for the battery itself, but the installation might have been $6,000 in terms of electrical labor to actually install that. Obviously, if you have 2 or 3 batteries and you install them at the same time, that'll be more efficient in terms of that. But as recently as about most of a year ago, a battery may have cost $10,000. Obviously, the battery incentive from the state can put a little bit of a dent in that. But again, talk to contractors, and that's the best way to know your battery options and their cost. Steve asked, does Solar Oregon have contractor recommendations or just through Energy Trust? We are brand agnostic, and we to us, that's kind of a sacred principle. We don't recommend contractors and we don't recommend brands of product. We are here as just the objective educational resource. The best I can do is offer you that Energy Trust link. And I can say that that is a really excellent tool, the solar bid tool, and using trade allies of Energy Trust in general to make sure that you're getting a high quality contractor that knows their stuff. So that is what we offer. Dan asks, can you share the links again? Yeah, sorry, I don't. I'll get them in just a second and put them back in the chat, and hopefully that'll help you. But I want to make sure that I answer the remaining questions here. Dag, you mentioned that it'd be nice to answer questions in print as well as vocally live. I want to make sure that I get them through them quickly, which is why I'm answering them verbally. If there's a question that you want to have answered by me typing, just put in parentheses, please type answer or something like that, and I will type the answer at the end after I've answered all the other questions. Lynn asks, is the 26% federal tax credit available for storage as well as solar? And that is an excellent question. The federal tax credit is determined by federal tax law, and what you can and can't do is a matter of federal law. There are solar contractors and battery installers who solar contractors are nowadays battery installers who will have opinions about what qualifies and what doesn't for the federal tax credit. My advice to you is that you should not take advice from somebody who is not a tax professional about tax law. Because when you file for your incentive, it's not something that your contractor is doing, something you're doing. And so I would love to give you a hard and fast answer to this question. And I will refrain though from giving you any specific answer because I'm not a tax professional. That's what I like to tell people. And so maybe possible you should talk to a tax professional though to answer questions about the federal tax credit. All right. I am not seeing any other questions. I see some comments, but no other questions in the Q&A. Yeah, if I missed a question, I will have a follow-up email from this webinar. And so if I missed one, feel free to respond to me directly. I'm happy to answer all of your questions. I'm here to be a resource for you. Thank you everybody for showing up for this webinar. I hope you learned what you need to about solar and storage. And if not, please reach out or come to a future event, and glad to have you here and to have you excited about solar and storage. Take care, and we'll see you next time.